Okay, great. Nice to see you here. We both from Canada, representing Canada here, although I now live in the U.S. But you're involved in a very interesting project that's listed on the Nasdaq. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved in that?
Sure. Hadley, yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm the CEO at DeFi Development Corp. DFDV is the ticker, and it's the first non-Bitcoin treasury company, digital asset treasury, a DAT, in the U.S. And we did a change of control transaction back in April, and it's been kind of a whirlwind since. Now I think there's almost 200 listed or about to be listed digital asset treasuries in the U.S. now. And we've raised about $400 million now. I think the balance sheet's around, it's a little over 400, and it's all invested in Solana. Yeah.
So to some people, this may be a little confusing. Like, what exactly are you? Are you a DeFi guy? Are you a TradFi guy? And if you're a DeFi guy, why are you, running a public company?
Yeah.
Why aren't you staying pure DeFi?
Yeah, you like to troll me about this. Yeah. So I had never worked in traditional finance. I've been working in the crypto space since 2013. I was at Kraken for 8.5 years. Most recently as the chief strategy officer there. And I left about a year ago now. And kind of found my way after the end of Choke Point 2. A few of my friends and I were talking, and we said, well, what are some of the implications of end of Choke Point 2? And one of them was the public markets in the US are going to open up to crypto. And another is that many of the assets that might have been considered securities in the prior administration would not be securities now. And Solana was named in the Coinbase SEC complaint, which the argument was that it was a security at the time. So the business that we're in and that many of these companies are in was basically illegal, a year ago. And of course, that's not the case now. So I guess I didn't think of like a transition into public markets as, oh, I'm going from DeFi to TradFi or whatever. It just sort of was a natural progression, I'd say, and I think where the market will go over time, eventually these two systems will kind of merge together and they'll just be finance. In 20 years, we're not going to talk about them together. Hopefully it's more decentralized than centralized, but there's just going to be one system in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. In Solana, there's very much the narrative. I think the foundation uses these terms. The Nasdaq, Solana will be the chain that runs Nasdaq from a transactions per second and regulatory standpoint. But you're kind of almost like a bit of a Trojan horse, but you can imagine a future where your stock itself will be issued and perhaps controlled on the Solana blockchain. Do you imagine that future happening?
Well, it happened already.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about that?
Through the partnership between Bakkt, I guess it's Bakkt and Kraken, with the X stocks. So we were the first digital asset treasury, I think the first digital asset treasury in the X stocks launch group. And so the stock is already tokenized. Its ticker is DFDVX. And you can go on, CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap and look at where it's traded. And there's, DeFi pools. They're very small. I mean, it's fairly illiquid, but maybe there's some opportunity for yield generation on some of the AMMs there. But for example, on Orca, one of the decentralized exchanges on Solana, you can trade DFDVX. Yep.
So how should this audience, we have a very institutional audience, how should they think of DATs, categorize them in terms of, because often come across as at Marinade when, you can stake directly through a DApp, you can buy a fund, you can buy through a custodian. So where do DATs play in the institutional kind of life cycle, and what's their place?
Yeah. Well, okay. This question, I always have to like answer with like additional context. So
Please.
I think when you say institutions, I think there's a bunch of segments of institutions, right? So, and the way that the subsegments will access crypto markets are different, right? So, I think probably the most close comparison for a DAT is probably an ETF, and the kind of the advantage that DATs have over ETFs is they can stake the asset, so they can earn yield on the asset, and the DATs can also participate in the ecosystems with which the assets are associated. So, for example, DFDV deploys. First, we run our own validators. I guess that's another difference. So we run our own validators. We stake our balance sheet to our own validators. We get third-party stake, and the key metric for the company is Solana per share growth, SOL per share growth, or SPS growth. And so we generate yield through staking our balance sheet assets, third-party delegation to the validators that then turn into this SOL per share metric or growth. And then we also participate in the ecosystem to which we're a part of. So one of the things we do is we have a liquid stake token that Sanctum actually like initiated this token, and we've kind of adopted it, DFDV Sol. And DFDV Sol is a collateral asset on Camino and Drift and Exponent, RateX, many of the Solana DeFi projects. And that lets users earn yield on Solana via staking to our validator just by holding DFDV Sol. And we hold this on our balance sheet as well. Some of the assets are deployed in DFDV Sol, and then we can use DFDV Sol as collateral asset to borrow or trade other assets in the Solana ecosystem, or just to buy more Sol. So you can't do any of that stuff in an ETF.
Yeah. And
so kind of end of the day, the ETFs, Solana ETF, for example, might earn, I don't know, 5%, 6% if they're lucky, or maybe there's a Marinate Sol ETF that earns 7.5 or something. Not to put words in your mouth, maybe that's an option. But we think, and our forward guidance indicates that we should earn more than that on our treasury assets. And of course, like we see with MicroStrategy, I think MicroStrategy or Strategy yielded something like 72% Bitcoin per share growth last year, and Bitcoin earns no native yield, and MicroStrategy or Strategy is not participating in the Bitcoin kind of DeFi ecosystem because it's nascent, I would say, and but they were able to earn that yield through the financial engineering side of the business, where they have been issuing preferred stock, where they're kind of taking the position as a Bitcoin-backed financial institution and can issue these financial instruments via preferred stocks. And of course, the convertible debt that they've been raising for years is accretive on a Bitcoin per share basis. And the other DATs, including DFDV, have done the same thing, which has resulted in, I think in the last 4 months, we're over 100% SOL per share growth. If my number is correct, I'd have to 100% check my number, but it's on the website, dfdv.com.
Yeah, actually your website is, to me, an interesting story on the transparency of the DeFi world. I think you've done a great job with it's almost a dashboard, right, of the different metrics, which is, really great to see. So I think, summarizing, I think the investor, and certainly in the US, there's just the fact that until DATs came along and until ETFs come along, there's a whole market of US investors that can't participate in Solana, and that's the same in the UK too. So that's certainly a part of it is access, but it sounds like if I'm an investor and I'm thinking, do I invest in ETF or a DAT, you're allowed to do more things. So I'm almost investing in the Solana ecosystem more broadly, right, when I'm investing in DeFi Dev Corp. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, but we have not taken exposure in other tokens
Yeah.
on or in the Solana ecosystem besides Sol itself and derivative assets kind of on top of Sol. But we do participate, I'd say pretty deeply, very deeply, in the ecosystem, and we ultimately generate revenue for those projects through deploying our assets across the Solana DeFi ecosystem. So yes, I think that is fair to say.
So I'm going to go back to the TradFi DeFi thing, which may be a personal tick of mine. I apologize, but I often try to think about like 5 years out. Where is the innovation going to come from? So you're doing, you mentioned you're doing some very interesting things with your liquid staking token on Camino and Drift, and Camino and Drift are leading DeFi protocols on Solana. But then I'm thinking, did they eventually become wrapped up in the broker-dealer public markets framework? Or in the future, does the public markets framework allow you to do the things that you're able to do on Camino? Where do you have a vision of where that's going to end up and how it's going to blend?
Now this might counter my blending argument. Okay, I think probably the long-term answer is, and this is like maybe very long-term, 50 years from now, maybe there will be, I guess, major changes in how these systems are regulated because today, I mean, they're kind of not regulated. And I think that's great, personally. But they're transparent because the code is public and the code is ultimately law. It's what enforces the contracts. So I don't know. Maybe longer term, the traditional or historic regulatory frameworks or systems are less and less necessary, while the decentralized kind of code as law systems can take their place. And of course we see orderly markets and I'd say a great deal of transparency come out of those systems, and I think that'll continue.
Yeah, everything is a bit of, blessing and a curse, right? I'm sure some people in the DeFi space would have liked some regulatory things happening on Friday with, stopping markets and putting a pause, which is a very kind of, the idea 24/7, it never stops in DeFi. And so DeFi people kind of look at traditional markets and think, oh, it's, shut down on the weekends with some derision. But then there's some benefits to having those, those controls in place. And so seeing how that all maps out, I think will be very interesting in the future. So, you've just started this adventure. Where do you see the company going? Is it like when you wake up every morning, is your primary focus acquisition of Sol and raising more money to acquire it? Is that the primary mission?
Yeah, ultimately that is the primary mission: acquire as much Sol as possible and generate as much Sol per share growth, which should translate to stock price appreciation, or we hope it does. That's kind of the goal every day. But how we do that, I think, is fascinating and allows us an opportunity to create financial products that may have never existed before, where we can bridge the public markets to decentralized finance. And kind of the primary tool, or one of the tools to do this, is preferred stock offerings. Yeah. So with preferred stock offering in the US, you can basically, if your lawyers can write it into the contract, then that's the financial instrument that you can create, right? So Strategy is listed for these so far, and the 4 of them they're all kind of interesting in their own right, I would say, but they're also kind of vanilla. And they haven't kind of seen a deeper crossover between kind of the two worlds, but I anticipate in the not so distant future that the digital asset treasury companies, and maybe DFDV included, will have preferred stock offerings that are tied to the underlying asset, or maybe they allow users to get exposure to, say, a stablecoin yield generation market or system through investment in a public company vehicle. And there'll be dozens of these, maybe hundreds in just the next couple of years. I mean, there's going to be a, I'll say, bonanza of preferred stock instruments offered in the US that give public market investors exposure to decentralized finance.
Interesting. So, you know, it's almost if you were to go to Camino Drift's page and look at all the products, you could imagine literally a security for each one. I mean, maybe not that extreme.
Maybe not, yeah, but almost that extreme.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've just done in the last 3 weeks, we did a partnership with Gauntlet, and Gauntlet created a drift vault for us for DFDV Sol. So DFDV Sol is the collateral asset, and then they run like a basis trade on Drift. So they borrow a stable coin and they run the trade, and it generates yield beyond the staking yield, where DFDV Sol is the base asset. Maybe that earns, I don't know, 6.5 or 7% now, maybe a little higher because of all the transactions that took place over the weekend. But it can earn net, I don't know, 3, 4, 5%. You can just go look at it on the Drift page, and there's a dashboard for it now. And yes, we could issue a preferred stock that just invests in this Drift vault, and then make that available to anybody with a Robinhood account or any brokerage account, that can trade U.S. equities around the world, which that sounds amazing. That's really cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think of that level. It makes sense, right? But then it's a matter of the level of investor education and the market for these type of, it's one thing to, I always feel like when at Marinade, I always feel like it's, our sales conversations are kind of like a Russian doll: blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, staking. So now I'm thinking Solana to various multiplier products on Bonk, that would be securitized. But you can imagine that happening. So talk to us a little bit. We're at Marinade obviously obsessed with validators, and even though we don't run any, we're a very large marketplace for validators. How does your validator infrastructure play into the operation of the company? Do you have in mind that you want to stake as much as possible? Do you have to manage that from a risk standpoint? What does that look like?
Solana staking is non-custodial, and there's no slashing risk. So we're pretty comfortable staking all or nearly all the balance sheet to our validators. And Parker, who is our COO and Chief Investment Officer, has been running his own validators for 2 years, and we brought his validators into the business. And I'd say we feel very comfortable staking to them. But we're open to deploying the assets otherwise if the yield opportunity is higher. Of course, we want to participate in validation and the security of the network. But ultimately, our responsibility is to our shareholders and to grow that SOL per share as much as possible. So if there's another opportunity that presents itself, for example, maybe lending the SOL is more profitable from one day to the next, right? Then we might take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about how the DAT ecosystem, specifically in Solana, I think end investors would think about, they're just getting exposure to SOL, but they're actually getting exposure to Solana staking, which is actually beneficial for the Solana network, right? Continued decentralization. And that's something, with the conversations we've had with ETFs, we want to avoid a scenario where, I think, 6 or 7% of Bitcoin is now custodied at one fantastic company, but at one company. And so for a proof of stake network, that becomes existential. Well, thanks for being here. Any last words you want to get across about DATS and DeFi Dev Corp to the audience?
No, well, I'd say the thing that I'm most excited about is the preferred stock offerings and all of the financial innovation that I think will kind of happen on top of it to bridge TradFi and DeFi through that particular instrument type.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.